5 days. That's how long it took for a $4 billion company to crumble after they fired me for being too paranoid about cybersecurity. The irony still burns when I think about it. "You're making security too complicated," they told me. "You're slowing down innovation," they complained. Then came the event that shocked the entire financial industry. Something so catastrophic that major news networks covered it for weeks and congressional hearings followed. My name is Alex Chen, 36 years old, former Chief Information Security Officer at DataGuard Finance in Boston, Massachusetts. For 7 years, I'd built an impenetrable fortress around our clients' financial data. Not a single successful breach, until 5 days after they pushed me out the door. Could I have prevented it? Absolutely. Would they have listened even if I stayed? That's the question that keeps me up at night. Because here's what most companies don't understand until it's too late. The most dangerous security threat isn't the hacker trying to break in. It's the executive who dismantles your defenses from the inside. You're too paranoid about threats that don't exist. CEO Victoria Mercer's dismissive words froze the boardroom air that day. For 7 years, I'd architected the cybersecurity infrastructure protecting sensitive records for over 500 banking clients. In just 3 weeks since her arrival, our new CEO had already labeled me as the obstacle to the company's digital transformation. I watched her tap her manicured fingernails against my comprehensive security audit report, the one that had taken my team 3 months to complete, the one that identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in the new streamlined platform she wanted to launch next quarter. "The board brought me in to modernize DataGuard," Victoria continued, her voice carrying that Silicon Valley confidence that came from 3 successful exits but 0 experience in financial security compliance. "Your security protocols are adding weeks to our deployment timeline. Our competitors are launching features twice as fast." I maintained my composure despite the 6 department heads shifting uncomfortably around the conference table. Nobody wanted to challenge the new CEO's vision. Nobody except me. "Those competitors have also suffered major data breaches in the past year," I replied. "Our clients choose us specifically because we've never had a breach. Financial institutions have regulatory requirements that I understand perfectly well." Victoria cut me off with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I just came from FinTech Solutions. I know what banks need." What she didn't understand was that our security system wasn't standard. It was custom-built, layer by layer, after our board repeatedly denied budget for enterprise solutions. 3 days after that contentious meeting, I found an email from Victoria in my inbox. Subject line, "Security Process Overhaul." She'd CC'd the entire executive team and the board. In line with our digital transformation initiative, we're implementing a streamlined security review process effective immediately. All security protocols will be evaluated against industry-standard benchmarks rather than our current proprietary framework. I nearly spilled my coffee. Our proprietary framework was what kept us ahead of threats. We weren't using it to be different. We were using it because standard solutions had proven inadequate for our specific client base. I drafted a careful response, explaining that our custom security layers had evolved to address specific attack vectors targeting financial institutions. I attached a 5-year comparison showing how our approach had prevented 17 attack types before they became recognized industry threats. Victoria's reply came 20 minutes later. "Let's discuss in person." When I entered her office, she was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The view was stunning, but her expression was cold. "Alex, I understand you've invested years in building these systems," she began, "but your approach is a bottleneck. Every release needs your personal sign-off. Every code change requires manual security validation. It's not scalable. It's scalable if we document it properly and train more. We're moving to automated security tools, cloud-native, API-driven, integrated into our CI/CD pipeline." I chose my words carefully. Those tools are excellent supplements, but they can't replace human oversight for the complex. "The decision has been made, Alex." She turned back to the window. "The board agrees. We're bringing in Consultech to transition us to industry-standard frameworks. I need you to cooperate with their team. And if I have concerns about vulnerability gaps," her reflection in the glass hardened, "document them. But don't obstruct progress." A week later, I found my admin access to the security monitoring platform restricted. When I called IT support, They explained it was part of the security normalization protocol from the CEO's office. All specialized security systems were being migrated to the standard enterprise monitoring dashboard. The enterprise dashboard that I'd repeatedly documented as insufficient for detailed attack pattern analysis. That night I stayed late, backing up my documentation and architecture diagrams to an encrypted drive. Not company data, just my methodologies, threat models, and system designs. 7 years of knowledge that existed mostly in my head and in scattered documentation that no one had given me time to organize properly. My deputy Raj stopped by my office around 8 p.m. "You okay? You've been quiet since the consult tech team arrived." I gestured at my monitor. "Look at this." The screen showed 3 unauthorized login attempts flagged by my custom detection system. Each attempt used valid credentials but from unusual IP ranges and at unusual times. "Why isn't this on the main dashboard?" Raj asked. "Because the enterprise system only looks for successful breaches. My system detects unusual patterns before they succeed." I leaned back in my chair. Nobody at Consult Tech even asked me what these custom alerts do before they started dismantling them. Raj's expression darkened. "Victoria announced a security migration timeline today. 3 weeks to complete transition to the new framework." 3 weeks? It would take 3 months minimum to safely transfer everything. She says the board wants quick results. The next investor meeting is in a month. I refreshed the alert dashboard. 2 more unusual access attempts. Something wasn't right. "Document everything, Raj. Every alert, every pattern." They might not listen to me, but they'll have to pay attention to the data. "You think they're actually going to read our documentation?" I smiled grimly. "They'll read it eventually, one way or another." I came to DataGuard after a 5-year stint at the Department of Defense Cyber Command. Back then, DataGuard was a promising startup with more ambition than resources. Employee number 41, my government experience made me overqualified, but the founders had a vision I believed in. Bank-grade security made accessible to smaller financial institutions. My father thought I was crazy to leave federal job security. In this economy, for a startup? But I believed in what we were building. For 3 years, I worked 70-hour weeks, building security infrastructure while competing teams fought for budget and headcount. When we couldn't afford enterprise security solutions, I built custom ones, writing code on weekends and holidays. The compromise was always the same. I'd build it myself, but documentation and knowledge transfer were perpetually deferred. That's a single point of failure our previous CEO, Michael, had warned. What happens if you get hit by a bus? Then whoever replaces me better be good at reading source code, I'd joked. Michael understood the technical debt we were accumulating, but he protected me from the board's constant push for faster releases. We had a rhythm. I'd identify risks, he'd translate them to business impact, and we'd find compromises that maintained our security edge. Under his leadership, DataGuard grew from a startup to a mid-sized company with over 280 employees and a reputation for ironclad security. Our client base expanded from regional credit unions to national banks and investment firms. Then Venture First Holdings acquired us. Michael departed with a golden parachute, and Victoria arrived with a mandate to accelerate growth and unlock trapped value. I should have seen it coming. The tech industry follows predictable patterns. Build something valuable, get acquired, watch new owners extract maximum short-term value without understanding what made it valuable in the first place. The first time Victoria referred to our security architecture as legacy systems holding us back, I should have updated my resume. Instead, I believed I could make her understand what we'd built and why it mattered. I was wrong. Within a month of Victoria's arrival, the changes became impossible to ignore. Security review periods for new features were cut from 2 weeks to 3 days. Penetration testing, once mandatory before any release, became optional for minor updates. Resource requests from my team were consistently deprioritized. Over lunch in the company cafeteria, Sarah from product development confided, "They're pushing us to double our output this quarter. Quality testing is getting squeezed to meet deadlines." "What about compliance requirements?" I asked, pushing my untouched sandwich aside. "We can't cut corners there." Sarah glanced around before lowering her voice. "Victoria told us we were interpreting regulatory requirements to align with industry standards. Her words, not mine. That evening, Raj approached my desk, his usually calm demeanor visibly shaken. "Something's not right," he said. "The consult tech team asked for our firewall exception process. When I explained our multi-layer verification system, they asked if there were expedited channels for rushing changes through. What did you tell them? That exceptions require the same validation as any change." They seemed disappointed. I stared at my monitor, a knot forming in my stomach. "They're looking for shortcuts." "Exactly." Raj hesitated. "There's something else. They've been asking detailed questions about our database segmentation model." That caught my attention. Our database segmentation was one of our most critical security measures. It prevented lateral movement between client data repositories. If one database was compromised, the others remained protected. What kind of questions? How it works, how it's monitored, how to modify it. I showed them the documentation, but Raj trailed off. "But what?" "The documentation isn't complete. You know how it is. We built it iteratively, and there was never time to document every component." I nodded slowly. 7 years of security architecture development, patched and extended and reinforced, with critical components existing partly in code and partly in my head. And now they wanted to streamline it all in 3 weeks. The calendar invite arrived the next morning. Security reorganization discussion with Victoria and HR. My heart sank. I'd seen this movie before, and I knew exactly how it ended. Friday, 2 p.m. sharp. I walked into conference room A with my laptop and 7 years of institutional knowledge. Victoria was already seated next to Lisa from HR, both wearing professionally neutral expressions. "Alex, thanks for coming," Victoria began, as if I had a choice. "I'll be direct. We're restructuring our security operations model, moving to a distributed approach that embeds security functions within each product team." I said nothing. Lisa's presence told me everything I needed to know. "Your position as centralized CISO is being eliminated," Victoria continued. "We're replacing it with a security champions program where each team has a security point person reporting to the CTO. "Who will maintain the core security architecture?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "We're transitioning to cloud-native security tools with API-driven management. More scalable, less dependent on tribal knowledge." Tribal knowledge. My 7 years of building custom defenses against sophisticated financial cyber threats reduced to an organizational anti-pattern. Lisa slid a folder across the table. "This outlines your severance package. 3 months' salary, extended benefits, and accelerated vesting of your equity from the acquisition." The numbers were fair. This decision had been made at levels above Victoria. She was just executing the plan. "We'll need your access credentials before you leave today," Victoria added. "Raj will handle knowledge transfer over the next 2 weeks. You don't need to come in, but be available by phone if needed." "Raj doesn't understand the entire system," I said. "Nobody does except me. Everything's documented in the wikis and repositories," Victoria replied, a slight edge to her voice. "Documented?" "Yes." "Comprehensible without context?" "Number." The board had repeatedly denied my requests for proper knowledge transfer. "Move faster now, clean up later" had been the mantra for years. I wrote down my credentials on the notepad in front of me. Domain administrator VPN, security console, monitoring dashboards. 7 years condensed into 8 password strings. "I understand change is difficult," Victoria said as I stood to leave. "But this is the right direction for DataGuard." Walking out through the lobby, I passed the wall of industry awards. DataGuard Finance, most secure platform, 5 years running, my work, my legacy. In my car, I turned off my phone and drove to the harbor. I sat watching the boats, mentally calculating how long it would take before the first security incident. Not if, when. The weekend passed in a blur. I updated my LinkedIn profile, reached out to old contacts, and tried not to think about DataGuard. By Sunday evening, 3 recruiters had already messaged me about security leadership positions. The job market for experienced CSOs was hot. I wasn't worried about finding work. I was worried about what I'd left behind. Monday morning, I woke at my usual 5:30 a.m., muscle memory reaching for a phone that would no longer fill with urgent security alerts. Instead, I went for a run along the Charles River, something I hadn't had time for in years. 3 miles in, My personal phone buzzed. Text from Raj. System acting weird. Multiple authentication alerts. Consultech says it's just noise from the migration. Can you call? I stopped, staring at the message. Part of me wanted to ignore it. To let Victoria and Consultech discover firsthand what happens when you dismantle security architecture you don't understand. But 7 years of professional instinct won out. I called Raj. Thank God, he answered, his voice tight with stress. We're seeing weird traffic patterns on the northern gateway. The monitoring system is flagging it, but Consultech says it's just artifacts from their reconfiguration. What's Victoria saying? She's in New York meeting investors all day. Check the second-level verification logs, I said. Silence. The what? I closed my eyes. Of course, they wouldn't know. There's a secondary validation system that confirms alert patterns before raising flags. If both systems are triggering, it's not a false positive. I guided him through accessing the hidden dashboard, a system I'd built during a weekend hackathon 3 years ago after noticing a pattern in attempted intrusions. Oh shit, Raj breathed. Both systems are showing the same patterns. You need to isolate the northern gateway immediately, I said. Shut down the external connection and fail over to the backup line. I don't have that authorization. Nobody gave me the admin rights to the network hardware. Of course they hadn't. In their rush to remove me, they'd forgotten to transfer the full scope of my access privileges. Get someone from senior IT, I said, and call Victoria. Tell her exactly what I told you. I ended the call and continued my run, faster now, as if I could outpace the feeling of impending disaster. 5 hours later, Victoria called. Alex. Victoria's voice had lost its Silicon Valley confidence. We're having some security issues, I heard. Our regular monitoring isn't showing much, but Raj seems to think it's serious. That's because your regular monitoring wasn't designed to catch sophisticated intrusions, I replied. I built separate systems for that. A pause. We could use your insight. Perhaps a phone consultation? You want me to consult on the security system you just decided wasn't necessary? No one said security wasn't necessary, she replied sharply. We're restructuring how it's managed. How's that working out? The line went quiet for a moment. We're prepared to pay your contractor rate for assistance. I smiled grimly. My contractor rate is $950 per hour, 4-hour minimum, paid up front, plus a signed statement acknowledging I'll have no liability for outcomes. I expected resistance. Instead, she simply said, I'll have the paperwork drawn up. How soon can you start? I can't, I replied. I've accepted another position. My non-compete prevents me from accessing your systems now that I'm joining a competitor. This was a lie. I hadn't accepted another job yet, and my non-compete had consulting exemptions. But Victoria didn't know that. Alex, this is serious. Yes, I agreed. It is. I ended the call and turned off my phone again. The next morning, I checked the tech news sites. Nothing about DataGuard yet, but by noon, the first headline appeared on a cybersecurity blog. Financial Services Provider DataGuard Investigating Potential Security Incident. My phone had 12 missed calls from various DataGuard numbers. I listened to the voicemails. Victoria. Alex, we need to talk. The situation has escalated. Call me immediately. Raj. It's bad, really bad. Someone's in the system and we can't lock them out. Please call. The last voicemail was from Richard Weber, DataGuard's chairman of the board. Alex, this is Richard. Whatever happened between you and Victoria, we need your help right now. Our client's data is at risk. Please call me directly. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold. 7 years building a security system, and it had taken less than 5 days for it to be compromised after I left. Not because the system was flawed, but because no one understood how to maintain it. I called Richard back. Thank God, Richard answered immediately. Alex, we have a situation. I've heard, I replied. What's happening exactly? Someone's in our systems. They've bypassed perimeter security somehow, and they're moving between client databases. Consultech can't figure out how they're doing it. Victoria says something about the data segmentation failing. The data segmentation, my custom-built isolation system that prevented lateral movement between client repositories. It was designed to automatically lock down if it detected unusual access patterns. Has the auto-lockdown triggered? I asked. Silence. What auto-lockdown? I closed my eyes. Richard, there's an automatic quarantine system built into the segmentation controls. If unauthorized movement is detected, it should isolate each client database automatically. Hold on. Muffled conversation, then Richard returned. Victoria says there's nothing in the documentation about an auto-quarantine system, because the board had repeatedly cut my requests to properly document our security systems. Emergency solution, they'd called it when approving minimal budget. We'll properly resource documentation later. Later never came. It exists, I said. I built it 3 years ago after the Trust Bank incident. More muffled conversation, then Victoria's voice. Alex, where exactly is this quarantine system? We can't find it in any of the infrastructure diagrams. It's not in the diagrams because it was implemented as an emergency measure during the security incident 3 years ago. The board approved it as a temporary solution that became permanent. Check the minutes from the emergency board meeting in June. Another pause. Yes. Here it is. Approved emergency security measures as proposed by Chen. But there are no technical details, because the board didn't want technical details. They wanted the problem solved. I could almost hear Victoria's frustration. Can you just tell us how to activate it? It should activate automatically. If it hasn't, something's been changed in the configuration. Nothing's been changed, Victoria insisted. Check the scheduled tasks on the security management server. There's a verification job that runs every 6 hours to confirm the quarantine system is operational. A few minutes of silence then. The task is there, but it's disabled. Who disabled it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Victoria's voice was quiet. It was disabled as part of the security consolidation. Consultech reduced scheduled tasks to decrease system overhead. They had dismantled my security system piece by piece, not understanding how the components worked together. Now they were facing the consequences. As DataGuard's nightmare unfolded, my phone lit up with a LinkedIn message from Elena Patel, C.E.O. at ShieldTech Security. Heard you might be available. We should talk. ShieldTech was one of the premier security firms in the country. I'd followed their work for years. The timing couldn't have been better. 2 days later, as I was reviewing ShieldTech's job offer, my phone rang. DataGuard's main switchboard. Alex, it's Sarah from Product Development. Have you seen the news? I hadn't. I opened my laptop and checked the major tech sites. The headlines were everywhere. DataGuard confirms major security breach. Client information compromised financial services firm. DataGuard suffers catastrophic security failure. DataGuard stock plummets. 32% following confirmation of data breach. How bad? I asked. Bad, Sarah replied. The attackers accessed at least 37 client databases before we managed to shut down external access completely. The system is in chaos. Nobody can figure out how to restore the security controls properly. What's Victoria saying? Victoria's not saying anything. She's in non-stop crisis meetings with the board. They've called in a different external security firm for incident response. An external firm that would have to decipher my custom security architecture with no documentation and no context. They'd figure it out eventually, but it would take time during which DataGuard's reputation was being destroyed. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. For the company, for the clients, for everyone affected. It's not your fault, Sarah said. You tried to warn them. The next morning I signed ShieldTech's offer letter, double my DataGuard salary plus equity, with a team of 12 security engineers reporting to me. By noon, I was in their downtown Boston office getting set up with new equipment. My first assignment, help develop an incident response framework for financial institutions. That evening, I received a text from Richard Weber. The board would like to discuss bringing you back. Name your terms. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Instead, I emailed Elena my first draft of the incident response framework. The subject line, preventing the next DataGuard. 6 weeks after the breach, I was settling into my role at ShieldTech when the Wall Street Journal published an investigative piece titled, The Dismantling of DataGuard, How Cost-Cutting Compromised Security. The article detailed how DataGuard's new management had systematically stripped away security controls in pursuit of faster development cycles. Internal emails obtained by reporters showed Victoria and ConsultTech had disabled key security mechanisms despite warnings from the IT staff. Raj was quoted anonymously, describing how my custom security architecture had been dismantled without proper understanding. The most damning revelation came from board meeting minutes. Over 3 years, I had requested budget for proper documentation and knowledge transfer of our security systems. The request had been denied 8 consecutive quarters, labeled as non-essential administrative overhead. The same day, 5 of DataGuard's largest clients publicly announced they were terminating their contracts. Their press releases cited irreconcilable concerns about data security practices and loss of trust in DataGuard's security governance. LinkedIn told the story as DataGuard employees began updating their profiles en masse, signaling the exodus. Victoria updated her profile too, Strategic Technology Advisor. No company listed. Her tenure at DataGuard had lasted less than 4 months. At Shield Tech, we received inquiries from several former DataGuard clients seeking security advisory services. During one call, a client's C.E.O. asked if I had been involved in DataGuard's security architecture. Yes, I answered simply. That's why we're calling you first, he replied. I took no pleasure in DataGuard's downfall. A company I'd helped build was crumbling, and hundreds of good people would lose their jobs. But I felt a quiet vindication. Security wasn't just overhead to be cut, it was foundational. 1 year after the DataGuard breach, I stood at the podium addressing the International Cybersecurity Conference in London. My keynote was titled The Human Element. Why security culture trumps technology. The most sophisticated security systems in the world are worthless if decision-makers don't understand their value, I told the audience of industry leaders and government officials. What happened at DataGuard wasn't just a technical failure, it was a failure of corporate culture. In the front row sat Elena, now the CEO of Shield Tech, after our security practice had grown 300% in 12 months. Most of that growth came from companies who'd watched DataGuard's implosion and wanted to avoid the same fate. After my talk, a young security engineer approached me. I studied the DataGuard case in my master's program, she said. It changed how I think about security advocacy. How do you convince executives to take security seriously before a disaster happens? I smiled. Document everything, build allies across departments, translate technical risks into business impacts, and always have an updated resume ready. The DataGuard breach had become a watershed moment in cybersecurity history. The congressional hearings that followed led to new regulations requiring financial institutions to maintain specific security standards and prohibited the kind of rapid dismantling that Victoria had implemented. Victoria herself had disappeared from the tech scene after venture tech suffered its own breach. Richard Weber had retired. DataGuard's brand had been absorbed by a larger firm, its name now a cautionary tale taught in business schools. As I returned to my hotel that evening, I received a text from Raj with a link to a just-published article. Former DataGuard C.E.O. Alex Chen named Security Professional of the Year. The accompanying photo showed me standing with my team at Shield Tech, many of them former DataGuard employees who joined me after the collapse. The article ended with a quote from me. Security isn't about preventing the attacks you expect. It's about building resilient systems for the attacks you don't see coming. And sometimes, those attacks come from inside your own boardroom. My father called me that night. Did you see the award announcement? He asked. I did. Looks like leaving that government job wasn't such a bad idea after all, he said. I laughed. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you're really worth. The DataGuard catastrophe had cost me a job I loved, but it had given me something more valuable. Validation that good security practices matter, that expertise should be respected, and that sometimes being labeled too careful is the highest compliment a security professional can receive.